Folks, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast. Today we have Stephanie Roulic with us. She is founder and lead organizer at Startup Boston. Stephanie, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and Startup Boston.
Yeah. Well, really excited to be here. As Charles mentioned, I am the founder of Startup Boston. So Startup Boston is a volunteer organization. Really, our mission here is to connect the whole New England startup community. So for us, that is not just founders, but it's also the startup employees, investors, mentors, students, really everyone involved in helping to both start and scale a startup. So really excited to be here and to share more about what we're doing and just talk about startups in general.
Yeah, first tell us about your first startup experience and go down on how you decided to start Startup Boston, because I'm pretty sure it's not the first startup community in Boston, or is it?
No, it's definitely not the first startup community in Boston, but let me kind of take it a step back to explain really why I started it.
Yeah.
So to take it a few years back, in August of 2016, I co-founded a MarTech company called N-Dash. And essentially through that experience in the beginning, I was a new founder, as a first-time founder. I was 25 years old at the time. And I just had no idea what I was doing. And I did not know anyone in the startup community here in Boston. So I essentially created Startup Boston Week to really go and check both of those boxes, to meet people and to also learn not just how to start, but also how to scale a successful tech startup company. So really that was kind of the reasoning behind creating Startup Boston Week. And Startup Boston Week in year one, which was September 2017, it just went really well. We had a couple thousand people sign up and I was like, okay, people are looking for this sense of community here in Boston. Like, let's go and take it another level. And that's really how we spun out the organization Startup Boston out of that conference. And we're definitely not the first, community-led organization in Boston by any means. But I do think what makes our organization so unique is that we're really kind of highlighting where to go based on your industry of interest or the department you're working in that you want to really scale up your skill set for. So we're not trying to be everything for everyone. We really want to be that hub that helps point people who want to learn more, network more, and where they need to go and mingle with like-minded folks.
Let's talk about N-Dash. So what happened with N-Dash? What did you learn from it? How did it serve you to be the person that you are today?
Yeah, no, I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes as well along the way. I was there for quite a few years. I think it was about 5, but honestly, I feel old. I'm forgetting how many years I was there for. But I was there for quite a few years and I learned a lot about what to not do when starting a company, and also a lot of, what types of skills and kind of skill sets and traits, like personality traits, you need to successfully, really grow a startup. It does take a lot of hustle. It takes a lot of grit. I learned a lot about having to sacrifice specific things in my personal life in order to really kind of help build a tech company. And, N-Dash, it's still in existence today. It's not, an overnight success that you hear about online, but it's still there. The other, co-founders are still at that company and they're doing great. So that's exciting. But it's not, that overnight success story that people love to chat about over at Silicon Valley or, in the tech scene. It was a startup. It did its thing. It's still in business. But it kind of reached its max level. And then I was ready to move on and to join another startup.
What's the difference between the Silicon Valley tech scene and the Boston tech scene?
Yeah, that is such a loaded question, Charles.
I know.
I would say one of the big differentiations I personally think between Silicon Valley and Boston is just kind of the openness of sharing. I actually think in Silicon Valley, people are more receptive to kind of sharing some of their trade secrets and what they're working on. And you see a lot of people, jumping from company to company, even competitor companies. And I think that's kind of what gave them the upper edge in early years, because there was that mind share and people really sharing knowledge, between competitors. Boston has come leaps and bounds over the past 2 years. It's been really exciting to watch how the Boston tech scene has grown. But I do think if Boston does want to compete with those types of Silicon Valley level companies, they're really going to need to do two things. One is be a little bit more open and take risks. You see a lot of, cutting edge technology coming out of Silicon Valley, maybe, thoughts, company ideas that aren't the norm. I think Boston has a little bit more to go in terms of that energy. And the second thing is I do think Boston needs to be okay with, people leaving a company, going to a competitor and realizing that is okay if it happens. It makes the community better. And I also think getting away with non-competes is a good thing too, because then there's more kind of pressure on the employer to be a good employer and to really kind of provide for their employees. So I think everyone ultimately ends up winning. I know that's a very loaded answer, but that's kind of my thoughts in a nutshell.
Pretty good. You know what? Like Silicon Valley rings a lot with tech bros to my ear, and your website kind of sounds like techbros.org. So that reminds me of like the challenges that females face in the startup world. How do you make sure that female are included in this beautiful ecosystem?
100%. So for me, that's really important, is to include both female entrepreneurs and also underrepresented founders. So for Startup Boston in general, for example, a lot of our organizing team actually are women. They really kind of, help create the conference that we do and also the events and content that we do year round. But also as an organization, what we really focus on is diversity of speakers. So whenever we plan Startup Boston Week, we are looking to make sure that we have, that 50% women, 50% male split. We really do want to go and highlight new voices as well in the startup community. So when people look at our speaker list, they do see a lot of, new faces, new voices, new companies that they maybe haven't heard of before. And that's really important to us, is to highlight, who is new and is really building what the startup ecosystem is today.
Tell us about the newcomers. What type of startups are trendy in Boston right now? Is it Martech, Clean Tech, and so forth? And how do they interact with the big boys, aka HubSpot, aka Dropbox, that were Boston started companies?
Yeah, so I will say there's a lot of different types of new companies that are growing in Boston. I definitely think that you see a lot in, health and wellness space specifically, also MarTech, biotech, all of those types of companies are really very promising in Boston because of, the medical surroundings, biotech, medtech, all of that. Yeah. Very, very strong. I will say a lot of ways people interact with like the enterprise companies based in Boston is a lot of it honestly is in line with partnerships. Startups are really trying to leverage, the partners, the pillar companies that we currently have here in Boston, and figure out either one, how they can go and create a product that perhaps can help their audience and maybe would eventually lead to an acquisition, or two, really kind of building out a partner referral network where, they're like, hey, like we'd really want to partner up with you, maybe do a rev split. But I really see those one of two ways happening, is like the rev split or, partnering up and hope for a potential acquisition if they play their cards right.
Yeah, I think the startup culture is also so strong at HubSpot and Dropbox that a bunch of people take this experience and go found their own startups, right?
I do see some people leaving the corporate world now to go and start their own startup, but I do think it's a little bit different now than it was a year ago, just with the way the economy has shifted.
Yeah.
But I did see a lot during, once people kind of not got settled into COVID, but after the initial shock of COVID, during the round of layoffs as well, you could tell a lot of people that were, normally at a corporate company were like, maybe that isn't so secure as I thought it was. Maybe it's more secure for me to go and build my own thing and really rely on myself to go and bring in that revenue. So you definitely do see that shift, but I don't see it as much as I would out in like a West Coast Silicon Valley office. I don't think as many people typically leave corporate world in Boston to start a startup, but it will change. It's slowly begun, but I do think that there is a little bit more of like a mental leap that has to happen on the East Coast versus the West.
Do you think the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that we're living right now had a positive effects on some sectors like biotech and MarTech, since everything's online now?
I do think it did. I think it actually had a really good positive effect, both on building companies, but also the community in general here. I think in terms of building companies, Martech for sure. I mean, I work at a startup that was born during the pandemic.
Okay.
Goldcast is a virtual and hybrid event platform. Like they really kind of were born because of their surroundings. And I think really grew quickly because the world was shifting and how they wanted to go consume events, specifically virtual and hybrid events. I also think that the pandemic did bring out a stronger startup community. I think going into the pandemic, we were a little bit more fragmented, but because of the pandemic, you could really see people leaning on one another, idea sharing on LinkedIn specifically and Twitter. And I actually think we came out of it a little bit stronger as a community, with people being more receptive, with wanting to share ideas, what they're working on. And you go to in-person events now and you're like, oh my word, like there's more people than ever here. It's great. I really think we came out better for it.
Sure. I'm interested in knowing more about Startup Boston itself, your business model. Where do you want to take it? The other day you told me it was a nonprofit. So what's your philosophy on that? And where do you want to take your organization?
Yeah, so for Startup Boston itself, we are going to be actively pursuing a nonprofit path. We're not there quite yet. We're still an LLC, but with a
Okay.
separate bank account. I like to make that clear. Don't want to be dishonest anywhere. But really, for the future, Startup Boston, I do see it as becoming a pillar nonprofit company here in the Boston area. I do want this to live on for the considerable future, even when I'm not there. I want it to live on. I want it to really be the go-to hub for people to visit and to check out when they're really trying to figure out where to start their startup journey. And I think that there's a lot more that we can still do, honestly, on our website and through our social handles. I really kind of I need to do a lot of thinking and listening, I guess, to the startup community over the next couple of months this winter. It's a great time to brainstorm and to plan, but I really want it to be like the place people go to in the near future, and to really kind of build that staple environment. I'm getting a little corny, but I'm excited when I talk about it.
Yeah, well, that I can understand the excitement. On my side, I want to build the largest startup ecosystem in the world, but for profits, So my next question is, do you want to start another startup yourself? Do you use Startup Boston as some kind of incubator, or to get ideas, to get connections? Do you want to launch again another big startup of yours? What are your plans?
Yeah, I mean, that is an excellent question. And it's honestly one I've definitely have been thinking a lot about this past year.
Yeah.
On a personal level, I'm really excited about building Goldcast for my full-time job. But I do think sometime over the next couple of years, I will want to go and take on another founder role at another tech-enabled startup company. So I do think that is 100% on my roadmap for something that will happen in the future, whether it's 2 years or 5 years from now. Only time will tell. It really kind of depends what happens, in life over the next year or two, right? But really in the interim, I'm excited about building Goldcast. And then for Startup Boston, I'm just really excited to go and to support founders and their ideas and help point them towards a co-founder or a potential client, or what tech stack they might need to help build their company. And all of that is just done as a community driven movement. No one is really profiting off of that at all. Like, we're just excited to support everyone.
Super cool. I love that. I saw the community awards on your website, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering what makes a founder win this prize. What advice would you have for founders to be really successful?
Yeah, 100%. So the community awards are really born because I wanted a place for people within the community to nominate others, to nominate themselves, and then to really vote on, who they look up to and who they admire. I would definitely say what I've noticed from doing it both last year and this year, one of the big things that moves it is how active a voice you have on social media. So I would definitely recommend for those who are looking to go and win one of those awards to, start using Twitter, start using LinkedIn, and also attend a lot of networking events. Go and
Okay.
build your network at places such as the CIC or Venture Lane or Mass Challenge, Innovation Studios. Those are a lot of like the hubs here in Boston that have amazing events that also bring together, founders, investors, mentors, year round. So definitely go out there, meet some people, and really talk a lot about what you're doing, what you're working on, and what you're, kind of gearing up to do next, much like this podcast. Like, this is exactly what you should be doing to get your name out there.
Nice. And as an investor, what do you need to do to be at the top of your game and be successful in all the meanings of the word?
I would definitely say for investors here in the Boston area, there's a couple things you should definitely do. One of them is, of course, attend different staple events. I think a lot of, the accelerator programs and the co-working spaces that are really laid up here, they're going to bring together a lot of like the top startups together in one setting. And the second thing I would also suggest doing is to be a little bit more, open-minded about, who you invest in and the ideas you're investing in. I'm definitely a big proponent in thinking about, supporting and investing in women-led and BIPOC-led startups. So I do think that they have incredible ideas and are often overlooked. So give them a shot, listen to what they're working on. It can only really help your portfolio, honestly. New ideas are always the ones that kind of break ground. So definitely do that.
Yeah, take risks and be open. Did you have any thoughts to convert Startup Boston into an incubator?
I actually don't have any plans to do that. Like, it's not even in the 5-year plan, to be super honest. It's really nowhere on my radar. If anything, I just want to start producing more and more content to go and support the startup community. I'm not going to lie, it was something I thought about a couple years ago, but then I voted against it. I was like, you know what? There's a lot of other great organizations that are doing that. And I couldn't think of a way I was going to do it differently or better. I'd rather just support people that are already doing a wonderful job with it. So did think about it, then dismissed it.
So how time extensive is it to run Startup Boston? Is it like 10 hours a week? How many events are there? Like, give us an idea of the time used here.
Oh yeah, that's one of like the big questions I get. It's basically another full-time job, I'm not gonna lie.
Wow, that must be intense.
um, Yeah, it used to be a lot less hours in the beginning. When we started almost 6 years ago, it was a lot less hours. But then as we've grown, there just seems to be more and more things that I want to do. And then I start adding hours. So if anything, actually, the past couple months, I've started to take a step back to really think about like, okay, what is the 5-year plan for Startup Boston? As we kind of think about, okay, do we want to do everything we're doing? Do we want to do other stuff? Like, it's time to take an inventory and really prioritize. Because it is something that's not your full-time job, but also something that could eventually become someone's full-time job. It's just important to have always like those little mental checks along the way to say, is all the energy we're exerting at X, Y, and Z worth it? Or should we only be focusing on X and, forget about Y and Z? So kind of taking that inventory from this end, but yeah, it's essentially a full-time job in addition.
Yeah. Well, props for you to keep up with that. Let's talk about your events. I've got a couple minutes left, so want to talk first about co-founder matching. What makes a good co-founder match? Is it technical and non-technical? Is it opposite personalities? Like, how do you find a good co-founder?
Yes. Okay. So there's definitely some basic skills you have to look for. That's a good, counterpart, right? Like, you want someone who has a different skill set than you. So if you're really good at tech, you need someone who's more business minded and vice versa. And I think that is always like the basic level of understanding when people are looking for their counterpart. I think to take it a step farther, I am a huge fan of looking into personality traits, because this person is going to be your partner in crime for, maybe the next 10 years if it goes well. And I think a lot of it comes down to, how they work, how they act, what their work, basically kind of like, how they prioritize their workload, how they approach their work schedule, how they think about the future, what they want to aspire to when as a founder, like a lot of like the ways they think, the ways that they interact with other people, the way they treat other people. Those skills cannot always be learned via Google. And I've Googled a lot of things as a
Mm.
founder, but those skills can't really be Googled. So
Yeah.
you should make sure that you get along with them and you respect them and you're on that same wavelength. And I think that that is like the number one thing, honestly, to interview for when you find a co-founder.
Nice. And how do you act up during those events? Because I used to do networking. I would always smile. I would be open to meet new people. It's always a bit awkward. Sometimes you
Yeah.
interrupt conversations. And of people like of my generation, I don't think they're into much like anything that is physical. We do like everything virtual, right? My startup was
Yeah.
virtual from day one when I started 7, 10 years ago. So how do you act up in those events, and how do you don't act up?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So I have a different approach to networking. I like to be really laid back and I like to talk about anything but work.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because I figure if you can have a laid back conversation with someone, kind of just, shooting the shit, honestly,
Yeah.
and you get along as a person, then I would want to take it a level deeper to find out, okay, what makes them tick.
Okay.
But to me personally, if they can't have like a normal conversation, and it's not someone I can be blunt with about what's going on in life, then they're probably not going to be a good partner when I'm building a company. So for me, I just always take it laid back. I treat it kind of like a party because it is a networking event. It's just like, a more professional party where you go and you mingle with people with your, glass of iced tea in my case. And you're like, hey, what's going on? How's your day? Do you have plans this week? Like, I like to just kind of take it laid back and not have that rough front. I think that that just provides a more genuine conversation, honestly. And it's never steered me wrong. When I was a little bit more, hard edged, I did not meet that many people. So strongly recommend being yourself, honestly.
Yeah.
And just kind of talking about random stuff to get a feel if you even like the person before you take it that next level.
That's kind of interesting because even in personal interactions, I tend to talk about business because I think work defines people since they spend more than 40% of their life doing that. And if it doesn't define them, then yeah, it still defines them because they didn't pick the right profession. Well, that's my opinion. That is.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think for me, I talk about business like 80 hours a week on the, on the one
I
occasion I
love
don't have to.
business.
I'm
It's
like,
so fun.
let's talk about running or something.
Yeah, well, both are like super interrelated, like athletics and business. Like, yeah, I could talk about that for years. And by the way, we're both iced tea lovers. I discovered not so long ago. I don't know why, but I never um, understood that there was some caffeine in Nestea, and I was wondering when I was younger why I would own everyone at Call of Duty 4 while drinking like 6 or 7 iced teas, and now I understood lately. But yeah, it's tea, right? So there's caffeine in there. Anyway, that's a small
That's why I
tangent.
love it. I love caffeine. My Boston folks know how much I'm obsessed with coffee. And then iced tea is the level after coffee when you're like, I'm going to have to go to sleep in a couple hours. So maybe I make the shift.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I love coffee too. I mean, caffeine is yeah the go-to drug for sure. Let's talk about one last thing before we go, because obviously there's other types of events here, but mentorship
Yeah.
exchange. I want to talk about that one. What makes a good mentor?
Yeah, I think a mentor for that one, you definitely want someone that you can look up to, and you do want someone that you can be honest with, but they definitely need to have quite a few years of experience on you within a specific vertical. So I think if you are looking for a mentor, you should know exactly what you want help with. Like maybe you need help becoming a better leader, maybe you need help, approaching investors, maybe you need help overhauling your marketing strategy. But as a person, you should definitely dial into what you need help with And then you do want to find someone who has quite a few years of experience on you. And if you're looking for, maybe a longer term mentor, those mentors can always become like an advisor down the road, or eventually join your startup when it makes sense. So also, you should determine if you want that person for a couple months or if you're looking for a much longer long-term relationship, and always be upfront on what you want with that person. It's all about respect. They're donating their time to you, so you want to be upfront on what you're looking for from them.
Candor, yeah, is the main theme today. So thank you for nailing that one down, because it's so important. I feel still in 2022, some people are not honest and transparent when we have conversations with them. So I'm very big on that one too. And here in my company, it's like number one culture value / communication, right? Always communicate everything. So thank you for sharing that. Steph, was amazing. Where can people find out more about you and Startup Boston?
Yeah, definitely. So you can, of course, reach out to me on LinkedIn, give me a follow there, or you can go to startupbos.org and subscribe to Start Boston's newsletter. I'll keep you posted on everything happening.
Thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful week.
You too. Thank you for your time. Excited to be here. I had fun. Bye.
Bye.